All right, welcome to the Psych Guys podcast. Psych Guys podcast, baby. This is Dr. Logan Noon. I'm Dr. Jun Chun.
That's right.
I said it right?
That's right. Yep.
I always mess with the pronunciation, but we are both psychiatry residents, second-year psych residents. We've been hosting this podcast to try to just elaborate more about mental health, like a mental health variety show. Today, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. And I know maybe you guys are like, I don't want to hear more about artificial intelligence. I know it's probably all over your social media feeds.
Hot topic these days.
It's a hot topic. So we're going to try to keep this conversation focused, okay? Not go too off the rails. I want to talk about how artificial intelligence is relevant towards psychiatry, towards mental health as a whole, how we think it might impact our future careers, how it might help our patients, how it might hurt our patients. It may be analogous to our careers too. All right?
Artificial intelligence is something that I don't know much about, so I'm just going to preface this conversation by saying that, so you may have to get me caught up to speed on some of them.
Right. And I think we should both disclose that we are not artificial intelligence coders. We have no real background in computer science. We both graduated from osteopathic medical school. We are psychiatry residents. I consider ourselves experts in mental health, but definitely not experts in this. I wanted to kind of start this conversation out with this kind of thought-provoking TikTok video I'll show you. I encourage all of you listeners to check out a recent episode on 60 Minutes where they touched on artificial intelligence, and that's what this episode is from.
Hold on, Logan. Can I interrupt 1 second?
Yes, sir.
So if you're saying that we're not experts in the field of artificial intelligence, we are psychiatrists who are experts in the field of mental health. What prompted you to want to have this discussion about artificial intelligence today?
Many things. I'm going to kind of pause on that answer, and I'll actually kind of say almost this video. And I was listening to a podcast myself, actually. Joe Rogan was interviewing Howie Mandel, and they actually brought up this video, and it really kind of had me like scared, freaked out, excited. They were talking about this concept of kind of like digital God and what that means. And I kind of wanted to talk about that. Like, is that actually different than how we almost view God in a self? I think today's conversation actually could get a little uncomfortable, to be honest, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay. But I thought this clip, and this clip is with, granted, I can't remember the name of the anchor of the 60 Minutes person, but he's interviewing Google CEO Sundar Pichai. I might have pronounced that wrong. I apologize, but he's the CEO of Google. All right. So here you go, June.
Of the AI issues we talked about, the most mysterious is called emergent properties. Some AI systems are teaching themselves skills that they weren't expected to have. How this happens is not well understood. For example, one Google AI program adapted on its own after it was prompted in the language of Bangladesh, which it was not trained to know.
We discovered that with very few amounts of prompting in Bengali, it can now translate all of Bengali. So now all of a sudden, we now have a research effort where we're now trying to get to 1,000 languages.
There is an aspect of this which we call, all of us in the field call it as a black box. You don't fully understand. And you can't quite tell why it said this or why it got wrong. We have some ideas, and our ability to understand this gets better over time. But that's where the state of the art is.
You don't fully understand how it works, and yet you've turned it loose on society?
Let me put it this way. I don't think we fully understand how a human mind works either.
Okay, so very ominous. So basically AI is just developing a mind of its own, and I feel like the implication is that it might go rogue on us, and it can learn essentially anything without being prompted. So Logan, I saw this thing in online somewhere. I guess Elon Musk was saying we need to put an end to like AI development or whatever. I just had no idea what he was talking about. But after seeing that video, I think I have a better understanding of it. So I guess in that sense, it's a very scary proposition that this machine was able to teach itself a whole ass language.
Right.
So if it can learn that unprompted in a matter of seconds, what else can it possibly learn? I mean, theoretically anything. We already know the answer to that, right?
Right.
But if it starts to learn the wrong things, and it just reminds reminds me of that movie. Was it I, Robot? Like with Will Smith, like years ago, they just become self-aware. They just start learning whatever they want, and they kind of use that knowledge and weaponize it, and eventually destroy the human race. So I don't want to like go into the world of like sci-fi, but basically it seems like we are headed in that direction if AI has this level of capabilities already. And I mean, as far as I know, this technology is relatively new. And yeah, if that guy doesn't understand it, I mean, he's like the CEO of Google, very, very, very intelligent guy. Does anybody understand it?
Right. You know, and what I thought was very fascinating, you know, I've been listening to a lot about AI. I find it extremely thrilling and frightening simultaneously. And, you know, what I've been kind of learning about is this concept of a sentient being. And I'll try to put that in my own words. And like, we as humans are sentient beings because we're aware of ourselves. We're aware of our own consciousness. And as it's been described, these, AI engineers and CEOs, at least I've heard a lot of them say, well, this artificial intelligence is not a sentient being. It's not aware of itself. But, you know, we clearly see in this video that AI is capable of learning things that we didn't even prompt it to. So I would ask, like, well, why can't AI just learn to be conscious of itself? What do you think of that?
My goodness, that is a loaded philosophical question. We need to get like Descartes in here or something.
What is consciousness?
What is consciousness? Yeah. What makes life worth living?
Right.
So I guess consciousness is hard to replicate. I guess it's impossible to replicate. It's something that can't be created in a machine, artificial environment.
Is it impossible? How can you say that with confidence?
Well, I guess I can't, because our understanding right now is that it can't be, but there was a time where we thought humans couldn't fly and we went to the freaking moon. So a lot of things change. And you know, this conversation reminds me of a little excerpt from the book Sapiens. I forgot if it was Sapiens or Homo sapiens, but essentially it was chronicling the history of the human race, and it kind of ended with this thought of, the evolution of humans as a species, how already we're integrated with machines on a pretty intimate level, right?
Absolutely.
Everywhere we go, we have our phones with us.
I'm wearing an iWatch right now.
Exactly. And I ask my wife this all the time. How long do you think you can go without touching your phone? And I don't think many people can go even several hours. So, I mean, if it's an object that you can't leave alone for several hours, I think it's safe to say, or at least an argument can be made that you're already, that machine is already a part of you. You're already one with that machine. So, when technology develops, like Elon Musk talks about Neuralink, we can implant a chip in your brain that you can instantaneously look up information without any other kind of prompting, right? Just with our thoughts, we can look up information. So if we progress to that, and where does that lead us to? I mean, eventually it seems like we're going to be in a place where humans and machine are going to integrate together, and we can have we can essentially create a new kind of species. So maybe that's at that point where AI can become sentient in that sense. Maybe they can kind of impose themselves on the actual human species themselves, and maybe even take over the human species.
Right. I mean, is the human species obsolete? There was an interesting conversation also. Did you hear any excerpts from the Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson? I know that's kind of a jaded, charged host, right? I didn't watch all of it, but Elon Musk also talked about how he had a conversation with one of the old Google CEOs. I can't recall the names, but talking about how this person called Elon Musk a speciesist, because Elon Musk was advocating for keeping the human species alive. And maybe that's why he was advocating for putting a pause in this artificial intelligence technology.
I guess it really has to do with what your philosophical view of evolution is. Right? Because traditionally speaking, I mean, according to the theory of evolution, humans, as we know them today, were not always this way. We evolved from a different being, a different species, something completely different, and something that's completely foreign to how we understand human beings today. So when we get to a place where AI completely integrates into our life, and we're headed towards a future where the human species might become unrecognizable, from our point in time, it may look very scary, but what does that picture look like when you extrapolate thousands of years out and they're kind of looking back? Maybe they just kind of look at it as just a continuum of the evolution of the human species. And, we're maybe at that point, we can't even be called a human species anymore. We would have just completely evolved into a different type of being.
Perhaps. And so I have a lot of kind of questions and just philosophical prompts that I want to kind of just touch upon today. And for the listeners, we're going to talk about this a lot. We're going to, I think, talk about artificial intelligence in future episodes quite a bit. And I really want to try to become an expert to the best of my ability in this. Because I've been really kind of questioning, we went to 4 years of medical school. We've now basically completed 2 years of psychiatric residency. We're almost done with our second year. We did pre-medical education, had to put in the work for that. Think of all those hours. Think of all that time and energy and just torture in some regard that we went to achieve this goal and obtain this knowledge base. Did you hear about how artificial intelligence did on the United States medical licensing exam, the USMLE?
I bet it did incredible.
Absolutely incredible. The first couple times it didn't do very well, and then it just absolutely murdered it. And, for context, how they measure the United States medical licensing exam is they measure you against your colleagues. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I remember, I think to pass, you have to beat 5% of your colleagues. I measured, and I really don't care if people know exactly how smart I am. I scored roughly in about the 25th percentile for most of those exams, which means I beat 25% of my colleagues. This artificial intelligence, I think it was ChatGPT, scored in the 98th percentile, beating 98% of the people like us who took the USMLE. So in many ways, I think a lot of us can relate to is my future job going to be obsolete? Is my future job going to change?
What a major ego boost for the 2% of test takers that were able to beat out this AI.
But maybe the next time they take it, it's got to be, they beat everybody. Yeah. They actually further in this, that 60-minute episode that I strongly suggest people check out. It's free on YouTube. It talked a lot about this artificial intelligence becoming a master of chess, and within hours beat the best chess player in the world and is now the best chess player. Could you even describe an AI as a player? I don't know. But I think, the fact that it can search all of medical literature very quickly is very exciting. I think about what this can do for our patients. At the same time, we've been seeing there's a lot of confabulation where this artificial intelligence will give answers that it doesn't actually have complete confidence in. Okay. I also know that, and I don't think I don't want to talk about this much today necessarily, but, there's this strange, how to best put this, situation in the world of medicine right now where me and you graduated from medical school. We're completing a residency. There are people get triggered by the word mid-levels, right? Advanced practitioners is maybe something a little bit more acceptable. I'm referring to nurse practitioners, physician's assistants who now go by physician's associates for whatever reasons.
Is that official? Is that an official thing?
I think it is. NPs and PAs, whatever. And I think in general, though, we can all safely assume that those people went through less formal medical training than us. But in reality, I can't discount that they have perhaps more work experience. With a nurse practitioner who's been working in the psychiatric field for 30 years, does that person have a lesser skill set than me? I don't know. But there are certain states that allow independent practice and certain states that don't. And I have, quite frankly, mixed feelings about it, to be honest. But now let's add in AI.
So you're saying replace all of them with AI?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. But is an NP that is supervised by a physician versus an NP that's independent versus an NP that's supervised now by artificial intelligence, what produces the best clinical outcome? What do you think?
So I think underlying that question is AI, can AI replace psychiatrists, basically?
That's a loaded question, right? I don't think necessarily replace. I certainly hope not, right? I mean, geez, we invested so much student loans
Yeah.
in this path. I hope that the word is more augment.
Okay.
I think that at least now, look, I have limited experience fooling around with this chat GPT and all this other stuff. But I think it's fair to assume, I would at least give it credit that perhaps its pharmacological knowledge is superior to mine. Perhaps.
And that's a major part of what we do.
Major part of what we do.
Let me ask you this, Logan. Did the knowledge of, these AI technologies have an influence on you picking the field of psychiatry? Because for me, it did.
No. I would actually say no. I'm here because I have mental illness. Short and sweet. I knew the second I entered medical school, I was going to become a psychiatrist. And if there was a shorter path to do it, I would have done it.
That's a very, very frank and blunt answer.
Right. So artificial intelligence didn't influence it. But I know that there are certain fields of medicine that certainly perhaps are more nervous than others. I think a lot about radiologists. They've been saying this for years, though. But maybe, I don't know, are we going to work alongside with artificial intelligence? I don't necessarily like to think that we'll be replaced, but I think using artificial intelligence as a tool to help improve our abilities to serve our patients is really the best attitude.
So here's the biggest argument against AI replacing radiologists. The best one I've heard is that you can't sue a machine. Perhaps the machine won't make mistakes, but come on, we live in a litigious society. We're looking for every little reason to sue, and you can't sue a machine. Maybe you can sue a company behind the machine, but I'm sure there's going to be doctors that are linked to that company that's kind of backing up that, that's giving legitimacy to that AI.
Right.
So that's the best reason that I've heard. And I'm going to share a little bit about how, this concept of AI influenced my decision to pursue psychiatry. I mean, I already was strongly leaning towards psychiatry anyway, but this just put it over the top for me. So to be honest, radiology was something that I was thinking about. I loved looking at imaging, but if you think about it, right, imaging, how do you actually learn? You learn by looking at image after image after image after image. And to me, that was just okay, this is exactly what computers are really, really good at. And there's no way that you can compete against a computer. And I think I was also reading articles that said already chest x-rays, AI can already outperform radiologists exceptionally well. And I also thought about other aspects of medicine as well. I mean, there's robotic surgery, right? I mean, what's to say you can't program a computer to have those kind of motions and, detect certain things and know that it has to do X, Y, and Z if they see, a certain thing. So I feel this is an issue that's of concern for all different fields of medicine. But I felt it was, if I can say there's a field where it's the least concerning, I felt that was psychiatry. Because innately what we do in psychiatry is, one, we're interpreting somebody else's subjective interpretation of what they're feeling. Right. And there's no lab values. And there's a lot of emotional intelligence that needs to be utilized. And I feel there's a lot of, that human connection is very, very important in the world of psychiatry. Many times, as psychiatrists, unfortunately, we can't do anything for a patient. But what we can always do and what people always find helpful, even in a seemingly hopeless situation, is when we're able to listen to them, when we're able to show them that we are able to give our time to them and really engage and try to empathize with what they're going through. And I think that human element is going to be the hardest to replace by AI. I'm not saying that it can't be done. It probably can be done. I know there's AI girlfriends and stuff like that. So I know it can be done, but I feel if medicine is going to be taken over by artificial intelligence, psychiatry is going to be one of the last frontiers for that change to happen. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's fair. Yeah. Because, when you interface and have a conversation with, one of these AI software entities right now, it feels clunky, right? It feels weird. It's not as seamless as, of course, the conversation we're having right now. Is it going to be that way forever, though? Probably not. It's probably going to improve. And there's other areas of medicine that, are certainly more, you could, I guess, just say robotic, literally, interpreting an image, or perhaps even maybe, a robotic surgery, something like you describe. What I really think our future role is going to evolve in as psychiatrists is advocating how people can properly use artificial intelligence to be healthier. And I think that we've done a very shitty job at that. Let me explain. Would you define the way that most people use cell phones as healthy?
No, but I think the reason behind that is because there's other human beings behind that technology. So when we talk about social media addiction or gaming addiction, these platforms were designed specifically for that end. They were designed to capture and really hold on with a firm grip to your attention. And even when you're not using it, they were designed to always keep that idea in the back of your mind, to constantly have that urge to check your phone. And we know, like, down to the colors, to the sound that's used, to the way things are laid out, everything is towards that end. So I think, in terms of people being addicted to technology, I think one of the biggest reasons is because there's human beings that are working towards designing that technology to that end.
Interesting. I mean, but then I guess I would challenge that, because it's like, well, don't human beings also design the code of artificial intelligence? Maybe one day this artificial, like kind of like we showed at the beginning of this conversation, like artificial intelligence can design its own code and do its own learning on its own. But I would almost say, like, isn't it almost the same thing?
So I guess that question depends on what is driving AI, because when you talk about humans, right, especially living in a capitalistic society, a lot of what drives human beings is greed to a certain extent.
Right.
This hunger for resources. They want to make money. They want to show you the ads so that they can charge ad revenue. But is AI going to have the same, value for money? Is it going to have the same kind of internal desires that us human beings have? Who knows? All this is like, speculation, right? Who really knows? They could be worse than us.
Right. It's fun and scary to kind of think about. And, I want to shift the conversation a little bit, but one last thing that, it seems almost standard practice in the world of psychiatry that we do try to remove people from their cell phones in some regard. And I'm sure this isn't exclusively always true, but a lot in my personal experience, I've seen psychiatric facilities that take away a person's cell phone, and they almost try to remove themselves from using that cell phone, try to get them back into kind of a mindful state of being. I don't even know, though, if necessarily it always comes from the person's best interest at heart. That's
what I was just going to ask you, Logan. What do you think, having worked in an inpatient setting for almost 2 years now, it's safe to say that we're very familiar with, the culture of an inpatient environment and what goes on there. What do you think, having that experience, is driving this policy that patients are not allowed to have their cell phones in an inpatient unit?
Money.
How so?
Liability. I feel like like you touched upon earlier, everyone's afraid of getting sued. So whether if, all these cell phones these days, we're recording on cell phones right now. I'm afraid that a lot of these policies come down. They don't want to film what happens necessarily in a psychiatric ward, or if a provider says a particular thing that could potentially create any element of liability. I think, sadly, part of that policy comes from that. And I would almost want to try to advocate for, I think it's good to take a complete separation from our phones, and quite frankly, I want to build that into more my personal life of literally turning my phone off and just trying to get in touch with who I am and nature. I think that's what drives me almost towards some of my personal hobbies, like surfing or skiing, where you're in these remote areas where your cell phone, or hiking, your cell phone like literally doesn't work. But in reality, I feel like we're almost setting our patients up to fail, because we take away that cell phone. Yeah, we try to get them back in that meditative state, just appreciate the moment. You can live without this cell phone, see? But then there's nothing in between. They leave, okay, here's your phone back, and then they just go back in their normal habits. So what I hope is that using, in the future, we can more develop kind of a means of, okay, well, this is what healthy cell phone use looks like. This is, and of course, this episode is talking a lot about artificial intelligence. This is what a healthy relationship with artificial intelligence would look like. Because what I fear is that this artificial intelligence, maybe this artificial intelligence can create this entity that could turn into like a person's friend. You can like talk to this person, and we already almost live there. You can like talk to Siri.
Right.
What if Siri could have like a really profound, philosophical, thought-provoking conversation like we're doing now? I'm afraid that what that would turn into is people becoming even more socially isolated than they are right now. And how much of social isolation fuels mental health crisis, addiction, just bad behavior?
Well, a lot of what those individuals are dealing with is loneliness, right? But maybe AI, like having an AI girlfriend or a boyfriend can replace that kind of loneliness. But then I question, what kind of an existence is that when a piece of software is just placating your every emotional need? I mean, that's not how we understand human beings to be in the traditional sense, right? We've always been communal beings. We've always been part of tribes. Historically speaking, it was always my tribe versus your tribe. We stick together because that's what our survival depended on. Logan to my right is going to be the person that's going to have my back if that neighboring village decides to raid our town, right? He's going to be the one to protect me, die for me, be a human shield for me.
I am fatter than you, yeah.
So I really wonder, like, what the moral implications are for that. And furthermore, like, if we are in a world where all our relationships are becoming just with artificial intelligence, how about things like just having simple arguments with your spouse or, your girlfriend or your boyfriend? I know, of course, you don't want to be arguing all the time. That, obviously leads to the relationship breaking apart. But in a healthy relationship, some argument is necessary.
Absolutely.
And it's also for your own betterment, for you to become a better human being. You need that other person that's there, that's going to be there day in, day out to call you on your bullshit and say you can't be doing that. So if that person is replaced by machines, and if there's a setting where you can turn off, okay, no, I don't ever want the AI machine to say this or this to me. Like, how does that affect our development as human beings? And overall, how does that really impact the satisfaction that we have in living life? And, I guess that leads to the question, what makes life worth living at that point? If there's no personal growth, if all our relationships, which I believe are essentially the most essential component to our being today, if life isn't about relationships anymore, what is it really about?
Right. And so what almost gets me excited on the other side of artificial intelligence is maybe artificial intelligence can help people connect with each other. Not necessarily connecting. Of course, we're going to connect with artificial intelligence, but what if artificial intelligence can help bring the world together to maybe across, you mentioned like tribal entities, right? Like maybe connect with people all across the world. Artificial intelligence, I get excited about. I right now can only really speak English fluently. I'm trying to learn Spanish, but I still suck. We had an episode about Korea. I can't speak a word of Korean, right? But what if I could interface with artificial intelligence and have a fluent conversation with someone in Korea? That excites me. What if artificial intelligence could find, me and you are happily married, but if we were single people, what if, and this already kind of exists, right, in this world of Tinder and Bumble and all this stuff, but do a better job about finding successful partners, bringing people together with one another in communities, finding if you're a person in mental health crisis, I think a lot of times, most especially, not always the right medicine, but finding that therapist that you feel comfortable talking with. What if AI could help interface and be like, hey, we know June so well that we think that you are going to be a perfect match for this therapist that's located in, Timbuktu, but you guys have the same sort of philosophies, the same styles, and we think that the AI thinks that you're going to get the most benefit connecting with that person. That's what makes me very excited.
But it'll eventually just turn into, it's going to recommend you an AI therapist.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that can cater to your every single need.
Yeah, I hope not. Because I do strongly feel that there has to be an element of human connection, and if AI is going to replace that, I think that's why we as psychiatrists have to so strongly advocate that that's not something, I think why I kind of wanted to have this episode, and we'll have future episodes very similar to this, is, me and you have gotten a little bit involved with advocacy, advocacy for our patients, for our profession, dealing with advanced practitioners and all that. But now there's an element of advocacy that is going to be advocating what is our relationship with artificial intelligence? What is it going to look like? I think a lot of people, we talked about, of course, our jobs potentially being impacted by artificial intelligence, but it's not going to be us first. Let's be real. Of course, the jobs that perhaps are related to like mining or perhaps data entry, things like that, seems like can be more easily replaced with an artificial intelligence. I think that we strongly need to be advocates perhaps of like a universal basic income kind of model to allow people to, put roof over their heads, put food on the table. And I think it is important to be able to have enough money to engage in hobbies that bring them joy. So I feel like our advocacy efforts are radically going to change in the future. And, I feel like a lot of times we get so lost in the details of supervision of NPs and PAs or, this medicine being prescribed and all this stuff. When in reality, I think the big bear in the room is actually now artificial intelligence and advocating for, I think a lot, maybe not enough, but some of these CEOs are advocating like a bill of rights for artificial intelligence, that this artificial intelligence has to put the human species first ahead of itself. How can we build that into the code? How can we build in free speech to make sure that our thought process is not being completely manipulated, controlled by artificial intelligence?
Seems like if artificial intelligence is, that smart, it seems like it can just easily reverse whatever kind of guidelines we give them. So perhaps. I guess that's a scary thought in itself, but hey, I guess there's smarter people than us working on this, and I guess we have no other choice but to put our faith and trust that those individuals will do a good job.
I actually have no faith in them.
Me neither. Yeah, that's why it's terrifying.
While me and you can't write code, maybe we can use artificial intelligence to help learn code and learn how to design code. But I think what we can do better than anybody is advocate for mental health needs in the most proper and effective way. And we're at the infancy of our career, right? And I think we're going to have to continue to grow and evolve over time. But I do think that we need to be at the forefront of advocating how are we going to have a mentally healthy relationship with artificial intelligence.
I love it, Logan. And when we think about the interaction between human beings and technology, at least in the real world today that we're living in, for most people, that's going to be our relationship with our phones, right? Our relationship with social media addiction, gaming addiction. And I just want to offer one final thought before closing this out. And that is going to be the most effective way, in my opinion, of controlling social media addiction. The best thing that I've found that works is just delete it off your phone. I mean, I think in today's day and age, it's unreasonable to just tell somebody like, hey, delete your Facebook, delete your Instagram, because a lot of people do rely on it for communication, maybe even their business. Maybe it's the only way they can connect with their friends and family.
Certainly.
So I think more and more it's becoming harder and harder to tell individuals to just completely get off those platforms. But I find, and this is something that I do in my personal life, just don't have it on your phone. Just make a commitment to yourself that you're going to just use it on your computer or your laptop, whatever it may be. And that, I promise you, is going to drastically cut down the amount of times you just, without thinking, just pull out your phone, start scrolling through your feed. And I think it leads to a healthier life overall.
I think that's a good way to end. If you made it this far, please subscribe, send it to a friend. A lot of this episode, I referenced that 60 Minutes episode on artificial intelligence. I strongly think it's worth. I think it wasn't actually even the full 60 minutes was about AI. So worth 30 minutes of your time. I strongly consider you guys, or strongly encourage you, to check it out. Thanks for listening. This was a great episode. Cheers.